What's going on, gamers? We are back. BT16, almost here, finally. And I'm here once again with none other than national champ, the Bryce. What's going on, Bryce?
What's going on, Joel? You know, just been grinding this new format because I've been over 15 already. And this format has a deck I like more, so.
True. BT16 really going to shake up the meta because it felt like 15 was kind of just BT14 part 2. Like, wasn't
Yeah,
much.
it added 2 pretty good decks, but yeah, it still felt like more BT14 because the nerfs to essentially the EX5 set just like really this set was too good. We need to delete like most of the good decks from here. So it was just BT14 plus.
Yep. So now
I will.
Go ahead.
I will say we got to at least dodge the most toxic format of all time.
We did.
So
that we did. Thankfully,
I would not have liked to play a Blockley format. That would have been ass.
Yeah. So BT16, we'll go ahead and we'll start right off with the big bad boogeyman of the meta. This is yellow vaccine armors. This is the you must be this tall to play the game deck. I think this is probably the best card that's ever been printed. Maybe MDF is in contention, but like as far as Digimon goes, I think Magnamon X antibody is just like an insane card.
That card is nuts, but they did also print a Pokemon. But this card is nuts. This card is super nuts. And it is the defining card of this format. If your deck can't really deal with that card, your deck basically has no way to function, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I think the best deck is the vaccine version, which is the yellow version of the Patamon, because it gets to play this card and also be super versatile in other ways as well.
Yeah, so the difference pretty much is that we have the yellow vaccine version. So you have the Patamon engine, you digivolve into Rapidmons as your level 4s, and then from there you can toolbox into Rapid X, or you can toolbox into Magna X with either the old, what's it called, Digi Armor, Digizoid?
Armor evolving the golden armor Digizoid, something like that.
Yeah,
golden something.
Yeah, it's the option that lets you digivolve any armor into Magna X, or you could just climb into an Ace, so Magnamon Ace, or Magna Angemon Ace, and then go into Magna X that way. So you can use Emissary too, because for some reason Magnamon X Antibody's vaccine. I don't know who decided that was a good idea, but it is.
Also, what's not a good idea is that the Rapidmon level 4s can evolve into the Rapidmon level 6 with Emissary, which is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, true. So
like you just skip 2 levels and gain memory, and you evolve from security.
Yes.
This deck is just so much for so little. Its biggest issue is that I'd say is it's really punishing when you make mistakes with the deck because you're so limited on the amount of stacks you can build. It's just hard to fit like good rookies in the deck, except for Patamon and like Floodgates.
Yeah.
So once you lose your stacks, you're like, oh, I'm so behind. It's like I can't do anything. But the deck is just nuts and does so much. And there's a couple ways to build it too. There's like there's people that play more around the Magnamon X. There's people who play more around the Rapidmon X. There's people who play more level 5s to get like the good inheritables from that. Like I saw somebody play an inheritable where you give barriers, so now your Magnamon X has barrier.
Yeah. Jesus.
Oh yeah, there's a lot you can do with this deck, and it's all of it is good.
Yeah, so we'll might as well, we'll skip ahead a little bit in the list and we'll throw in, so this will be the Vmon version of Magna X. So basically your low end is all Vmons, your level 4s are Magnamons, and then you go into Magna X that way. So I would say this build is a little more consistent. It has like, I would say a higher skill floor, but a lower skill ceiling. You can't high roll as much because you're not cheating out your Magnamon with Emissary and stuff like that. But it is more consistent because you can actually just straight digivolve Magna X on top of your level 4s instead of having to wait for an option.
Yeah, or I mean, if you don't have the option of evolve for 4, which is just sucks. In this deck, you just evolve for 3 on everything. Some of the Vmons reduce that cost to 2 on some things. And it's a lot more straightforward, so I think it's going to be more popular. It's going to be easier to play, and people could just like, all right, I'm going to evolve from Vmon to Magnamon X, and you have to deal with it.
Yep. What else is this deck gets? You can toolbox a little bit more with this deck. You can do different options than you could with the yellow version. So I see people running the Mindling Tamer that gives Alliance. I forget her name. think it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, the black one, because it can link to X antibodies, so you can link it to the Magnamon, and now Magnamon is more of a threatening card, does more checks. You could play that in the vaccine version, but the vaccine version already has to play like a ton of tamers and a ton of conditional cards, so
yeah,
it's
I
like
think
hard to fit those.
you're focusing more on TKs in the yellow version, I feel like.
Yeah. So, but you get to play like some different tamers. Davis is always a good tamer.
Mhm.
You also get to play the new Davis is a good tamer. You get to play Fire Rocket and Zubagon Punch. It's more aggressive, more straightforward. Easy, like I said, lower skill floor, easier to play. But also higher skill floor, easier to play, but lower skill ceiling, harder to like get like the push above. But both these decks are tier 1. They're both incredible.
Yeah, pretty much these are both playing off the strength of Magnamon X. It's just really changing up how you get there and changing up your game plan in like the mid-range portion of your deck. So we will move on. That's the best deck of the format. I think there's really nothing much else to say besides that.
Yep, good deck is good.
Yes. Next one is Phoenix X. The bird deck finally finished getting all its support. I think the deck is cool. You do a lot of cool things with this deck now, especially with the Phoenix X letting you proc all your on deletions at end of attack. This deck has big what does your deck do energy, so if you don't know what they're doing, they're gonna smack you up with like a million different effects on one turn with one stack. Unfortunately, because this deck relies so heavily on deletion and doesn't really have a way to proc its own on deletions, it folds to like a single bounce, like a single non-deletion removal. So for me, unfortunately, I think that this deck is probably just tier 3, maybe low tier 2. But I think there's a lot of decks in the meta that can get around this deck's effects.
Yeah. I will say it is at least like almost like it's like actually you can do good at your locals now. Like it's not just a trash deck that does nothing. It actually has some gas, and like Phoenixmon X does, and I think also like the Garudamon X and also the Garudamon Ace that we got last set. They're all good cards. Like the deck actually has good cards that it wants to go for that supplement the game plan.
Yep.
It is just unfortunate. It's like a little weak to floodgates and really bad to bounce. So if you're not playing a bounce deck, this deck could be arguable that's tier 2. But as soon as you find a bounce deck, like, oh, this deck is the worst deck.
Yeah. So Mirage, Tyrant, what else? Imperial. Yeah. So
anything that plays Zudomon if it wants to.
Yeah, it's a little unfortunate, but the deck is fun and it has a lot of cheater cards. Actually, if it didn't die so heavily to bounce, I think this deck would probably be like high tier 2.
We might put it in low tier 2 by the end, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Maybe we bump it up a little bit, give it a nod.
Mm-hmm. If you're a bird believer, is crazy. Yeah, if you're a bird believer, then you already know. Like, moving on. Imperial. So Imperial got a lot of new support this set. A lot of new good support. Fighter Mode Ace is a crazy card. New Imperialdramon. The new Davis can really lets you speed up your game plan. I will say problem with this deck is it's probably more piece reliant than it ever has been. Like you really need to be able to DNA to get that partition effect off. So
it is more piece reliant, but the new Tamer lets you search more often, especially if they can't answer your rookies easily.
Mm-hmm.
I've been on the fence of putting this deck between tier 1.5 and tier 1, but this deck feels so strong when it's working, but then like, oh, this is the game, like I'm not drawing any pieces and this feels really whatever. But also gets to still play some of the better options in the game, and Megadeth being one of the cheapest good removal cards. Gigadeth is actually a good card now because of ace cards and a lot of suspend. True. And your level 5 suspends everything, so it lets you proc it.
True.
This deck seems really strong. It's just, so you have to find a bunch of pieces to make it work. But when you're high rolling this, like, oh, this is the best deck in the game, and it's not even close.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Imperial's always kind of been like that, right? You can draw your Exodia hand. I will say this deck does have some like big weaknesses. I think getting over the Magna X is going to be tough, especially if they don't play in a fighter mode ace. Also, Tyrant can be a really tough matchup if you're not seeing your Megadeths or even Gigadeath, and that matchup is pretty good. But
yeah, Tyrant is like kind of very back and forth. Just depends on like how you build it. Like the more options you put in your deck, the better. But then the more Shivamons they put in their deck, the better. So.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if this deck is 1.5. I think it's like really high tier 2.
I almost put it tier 1, so I think we just consolidate and go in the middle.
Okay, I'm okay with that. I was a believer until I started playing the deck more, and then I realized how piece reliant it was, and then I kind of
played it. I just think that like there's a lot of things that are slow enough where I can still find my pieces, and like the cards that you get are so strong. Like, I was also playing, like I played against like the Gargomon cards are really good, and they, even though like, oh, they get ace and try to block, they can't block because you can't unsuspend when you go for Imperialdramon. So it just has so many tools to do with so many things.
That's true.
Like, that's like one example. Like, your Digimon can't unsuspend is a really strong keyword on a deck that's trying to be aggressive. So it's like it's like a thing we've seen in the game a lot, where a deck that is aggressive and has good control tools is generally pretty good. And I think that's kind of where this deck lands.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good point. All right, we will move on to this is Shakamon DNA. Also got some new support with Cody and TK Tamer, some new Armadildomons, and there's a new Patamon specifically for this deck. Overall, unfortunately, even though Shakamon and Cody and TK Dual Tamer are pretty good cards, I think it's missing like a strong top end, and the bottom end is kind of all over the place because the old support for the Shakamon deck was yellow-blue. So your colors get a little weird.
I played this. The support is all over the place. The biggest issue I have with this deck, though, is that it just can't end the game. Yeah. It has that like old vaccine problem. It does not end the like Shakamon is crazy. Like, you're unaffected. Like, anything that's unaffected but also has partition. So it's like, oh, I can't be deleted by Digimon effects, but if I do get rid of it, then that means I get the partition. It's super strong. It's super annoying. They play the ace cards almost better than any other deck, but playing ace cards doesn't mean you're attacking. It means you're waiting for them to attack you all the time.
True. So
you can't finish a game. So it's like to make weird, awkward decisions and play really awkward cards to try and end games. Otherwise, you're just sitting there not doing anything. But you can win certain matchups because they literally just can't deal with your cards. So it's not the worst deck, but still probably tier 3.
Yeah, having Digivolve on a Tamer effect is really good. Like,
that's nuts. It's so crazy.
It's really good, but unfortunately, the rest of the deck just kind of falls short.
I think its biggest lacking point is its level 4s are just very whatever. Like,
yeah,
the rookies aren't great, but there's a lot of ones that are manageable. Like the promo Patamon searches a ton of cards in the deck that searches like yellow and black from security, and there's like a ton of good yellow and black cards. Like you can take like Tekken Death X and stuff into your deck. You can take all of like your aces could be black or yellow. The new Armadilomon that searches is good, but like the level 4s, like there's none of them are good in this archetype.
Yeah, pretty tragic.
If this archetype had like Imperial's level 4s, it actually might be like a pretty broken deck.
Yeah, you just need level 4s that can just turbo you memory. It's like the same way Imperial plays. Like, just level 4s, end of turn DNA, gain back all the memory. Like,
I think it's good to mention though that every partition deck got a dual tamer, and even if their decks aren't good, all of those cards are good, and so maybe one day they'll get another support that makes any of those decks broken.
That's true. That's true. Some future support, look out. We will move on to TyrantKabuterimon.
You've been playing a ton of this. Tell us, what's the verdict so far?
Oh man, I followed like the what's it called, like the Dunning-Kruger whatever curve, where it's like the less you know about something, the more you think you know, and then as you actually learn, you realize that you don't know anything. Like, it's like a bell curve. I don't know. So basically, when I started playing this deck, I thought it was good. And then as I started playing it more, I thought it was shit. I thought the deck was so bad. And then I've come all the way back around full circle to realizing that this deck is actually good. So the biggest... I'll start with what's good about the deck. Okay, TyrantKabuterimon, huge wall. He gets huge DP, unaffected by Digimon effects. And you can cheat him out with stuff like Rhino Kabu, HPD, Izzy and Mimi. Whoa, getting a little crazy. But yeah, you don't necessarily have to pay 6 for him. So you can get a lot of value. And then you have redirect instead of block. So redirect is a slightly better version of block, I would say. It's better in almost every scenario, I think. I'm pretty sure. But you have to redirect to suspended Digimon, which makes it tough. Because sometimes you can't suspend your own Tyrant. You get in a weird position where you have to attack in order to suspend, but you can't attack because they have something bigger than you, or you're going to run into security. It gets weird. So there's that. Things that are negative about the deck, you are incredibly piece reliant. Like, you have to see your pieces in the exact right time at the exact right order against certain matchups in order to win. And in a green deck where you have 0 draw power, like your only draw power is Man Boost and Agility Training, it can get
And like the new rookie that searches.
Yeah, you gotta search a rookie, which is nice.
A little bit,
A
but
little
not.
bit, yeah.
It's not as nearly as much as some other decks.
Yeah, so that's the unfortunate part. And then also your aggro can be a little low since you're playing so defensively a lot of the time that just sometimes getting those checks in can be tough. You have the option to go aggro with cards like Lotmon, and then the Grand Kuwaga Ace lets you give security attack +1 to something. So the option is there, but the way the deck plays, you're almost never going for those aggro options unless you're already in a winning position. So it can be tough. But yeah, overall, I think the biggest strength of this deck is big DP, unaffected by Digimon effects, and that's enough to carry it to tier 1.5.
Yeah, I will also say, like, depending on how it's going, I feel like it's pretty solid into Magnamon X. Like, it's one of the decks that, like, you must be this tall, right? In fact, I'm actually taller, and unless you draw your options, I'm just bigger than you, and now I'm a problem.
Yes. So Magna X is, I'd say it's 50-50 matchup until they draw Heaven's Judgment, and then it's sad boy hours. But yeah. You can kind of negate that with the Shivamon. This is one of the matchups why you have to play Shivamon and Tyrant, but Shivamon in and of itself is a little bit of a break. So
yeah, like I said, it's a good deck. It has a decent matchup against something meta. It gets huge and it walls a lot of decks out. Like some decks just can't deal with, oh, you can't delete by Digimon effects. Guess you can't play the game.
Yeah.
And it's huge and it's pretty strong. Oh, and it has Tamer removal, which is a really good thing to put in a deck.
That's true. Grand Kuwaga Ace does delete Tamers, and it comes up a lot. So yeah.
Yeah, very, very solid deck. It definitely has a lot of skill, like expression, but like I said, he said, piece reliant. Also, when you can cheat it out, but when you can't cheat it out, 6 will evolve so much.
Yeah, you get stuck in positions where sometimes you have to digivolve in a Tyrant for 6, and you pass your opponent with 5 memory, and at that point they just clap you back. There's like nothing you could do. Yeah, really sad.
It's cool that it also works like level 7, but 6 memory. Oof.
Yeah. Is what it is.
1.5 though. It's definitely good enough.
No, 100%. Moving on, this is Magnamon Myotismon. Got a bunch of new support this set. New Tamer, 2 new Digimon, a new boss. You have Myotis Ace from last set too. So slowly this deck has been building up support. Unfortunately, I still think the support goes nowhere. I think this is just straight up tier 4 fun. Like, you build it if you want to have fun, but it's not doing anything for you to win a game.
Yeah, it also is a deck that's very reliant on deleting Digimon by Digimon effects. Like, that's part of the whole gimmick. And a lot of the best decks in this format just say no. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, they delete their own Digimon by effects, though. But
no, it's like they delete their own Digimon, and then their cards that come out delete the opponents, I think.
I forget what the new level 6 does. It does something like that. It does delete stuff.
They also trash security. Also, purple in general is just in a terrible spot. Part of the reason is that Ace cards are starting to like actually really come into the meta, and like good defensive options are becoming viable. And purple has none of them. Their best one is the Garurumon card that gains memory, which they can still lose if the person's just attacking into that Garurumon. So
Myotis Ace has blocker, bro. Don't forget.
He's a blocker with Retail, and Retail's an effect. It deletes a Digimon by an effect. So that's not what we're looking for right now.
Yeah, all right, Myotis for fun. We'll move on to, this is Rapidmon X Tribal. So bunnies, just bunny tribal. Yep. You got Terrier X in this set as well. Unfortunately, even though Rapidmon X is a very good card, it is not as good as Magnamon X. And Rapidmon X is just better in the Vaccine Armor deck where you can play both. So
yeah, I'd say the thing is there are a lot of situations where Rapidmon X is actually better than Magnamon X. Mm-hmm. But if that's the case, why not just play the deck that can play both of them, and both of them can be good in my deck? I think this is the worst armor deck. It's still really good. Mm-hmm. Personally, in my opinion, it's like the top of tier 2. It's like not tier 1.5 quite yet.
I agree,
but it's like right there. It's like knocking on the door because it is very strong. It's just the vaccine does what my deck does, but better.
Yeah, I will say I've played a little bit of this deck, and I've played against it a bit as well. If you draw a good hand on curve, like you have starter deck Terrier into Willis for 1, put another Terrier in the bag, then you got Rapid X, kill one of their guys, gain back 2 memory. Like, this is a powerful tempo deck. If you get rolling turn 1, turn 2, you are very strong. That's like when you're at your strongest, is turn 2, turn 3 with this deck. Like, you have so much pressure with the Rapidmons and Rapid X, and then if they try to counterattack you, you have Gargo Ace ready to go, because Gargo Ace can also Digivolve over Rapid X. So it's always live. This deck is very, very powerful, like early mid-range deck. Like the first 3-4 turns of the game, if you're rolling, like you're him with this deck.
And also, like, because it's a deck that can play 4 Rapidmon X pretty easily, it has constant access to board wipes. Like, if you're playing like more mid-rangey guys, it just minus 5k to everything. All right, minus 4k to everything. All right, minus 5. Oh, suspend all. And so I think one of the advantages it has over the vaccine deck, because it does have some advantages, is one, like vaccine, like I said, if Patamon's not hitting, it's kind of awkward to evolve into your level 4s. This deck evolves into level 4s for super cheap. Yeah. With the Tamers and the reduced cost from the Rapids. And then Mega Gargo Ace is still a really strong card, like as a defensive card. It's like blocker, reboot, and your opponent can't Digivolve over that target. Yeah. And it suspends stuff, so like Mega Gargo and like just the ease of access of getting into your level 4s. Yeah. And this deck has... It can get there. You can get there with this deck, 100%. It's just... I will not be surprised if this tops. Yeah. 100%. It's just a matter of, is this deck better than just Magnamon armors? And the answer is no in the majority of situations. So that's really all it is. All right, we'll move on to Dino B. We'll say this is Virus Imperial. Yeah. Got new support. You got the new Wormmon. The new Vmon is red. The new Wormmon is purple. Dino B. The new Dino B itself is a pretty good card. Very strong card. I personally would put this deck probably in tier 2. Like, Virus has been kind of whatever, but you get to kind of use all of the good Imperial support on top of your Virus engine. So it's probably just good enough to squeak itself into tier 2. Yeah, I mean, this deck has so much support. I personally haven't seen a build, but I would not be surprised if someone cooked something up with this Virus Imperial deck with all the new pieces now. I've seen it twice. I think it's just not a popular deck, but I think it is good enough to get squeezed into tier 2. It still probably has the issue where it's like super bad at the Death X, which is a popular card. Like the whole Virus engine, just like Death X, literally, like it's like at end of turn, I try to do all my stuff. Well, but then then end of turn, after doing all of that, attack, and then Death X just pops it. Yeah. So if you see a Death X, you literally can't win with this deck, which is unfortunate. So it's like, but it does still do a lot more and can use all of the good Imperial support. Like, even though it's like a blue-green tamer, it works with all the Virus cards because it just plays Wormmons and Vmons, and when you evolve into your level 5s. That is true. All right. Hopefully someone cooks something with that. Moving on to... This is the new Dorugoromon with Collision. Has an interesting interaction where Collision does force Magnamon X to block if that's their only Digimon on the board. The problem that I've seen with this deck and trying to make that interaction work is that it's actually really hard to get your Dorugoromon over 15k, which is kind of like where you want to be at to swing over Magnamon. It has a cool gimmick, but I don't know if it's like good enough. I want to put this like tier 3. I think it's tier 3. I think it's currently in the BT17 waiting room. I think the BT17 support's actually kind of crazy for the deck because it gives the deck what it's lacking, which is protection. And the way its protection works is really dumb. Instead of dying, I evolve for free from trash. Oh yeah. And then get my Evo effects, and that also do a lot. So they get really good support. Then it's not it's not gonna make, oh my god, this tier 1 out of nowhere, but it's kind of in BT17 waiting room. Yeah, I agree. All right, we'll move on to... So this is the new Darkdramon from BT16, but that card sucks. So I'm just going to say this is... I'm going to say this is just Commandramon in general. Like, not DPs, like... We have Commandramon on our list. This is bulk. Oh, yeah, that's true. We do. Okay, you're right. This is bulk. Right. It's looking for the boss trait. Literally nothing exists with it yet. We need to wait for more cards that do that. Yeah, well, the Bonchos have boss traits, so this is supposed to be a facilitator to go into the Chaosmon DNA, but it's not fucking worth it, like, at all. Yeah, maybe one day there'll be a card that supports this, because it is reducing its cost by, like, infinite. Yeah. But not yet.
All right, we'll move on. This is the new Pulsemon level 6. So this is for the Pulsemon deck that got so many support cards in this set, and I think they're all trash. I think this is maybe for fun. For fun, like I guess.
Yep. All right.
Okay, Big Uko is not a real deck in and of itself. Yeah, like you can maybe tech it into something.
I think. Yeah, but I think this is good for like the Rookie Rush deck. The Uko Rookie Rush.
I don't even think that's a real deck. Like, what is that? What do you do against Magnamon? Just fold.
You should probably just fold. So it's here. You get to play Ugumon, and sometimes they don't set up Magnamon, but it is probably not good.
Alright, we'll put it for fun. Just because I think the card itself is actually pretty good. It's just like, what do you play it in?
I mean, there's the Uko Rush deck. We get one of the best cards in the game, which is the new Ukomon, but that's enough for this deck, because other decks can play that better.
Yeah.
We'll get to those decks later.
True. Alright, we'll move on. Valkyrymon, we'll say this is for the red-yellow DNA deck. This deck, Valkyrymon Ace, is a very good card. The deck that you're quote-unquote supposed to play it in is trash. Like,
I think it's about as good as the Shakamon deck, just because it gets to play all those cards.
Yeah.
And Valk Ace is like, I think Valk Ace is a tier 1 card. It's just its own decks are tier 3.
Yeah, I agree. Enough said about that.
Tier 3, tier 4, whatever. Same. It's not
Fenriloogamon got a lot of new support this set too.
One big support, really. They got a couple small things, but one card is so nuts.
Yeah. Yeah.
This Fenriloogamon card is so goddamn crazy.
Yeah, when I was reading that card at first, I'm like, man, how does this ever come up? And then when you play against them, it's like, oh, this card comes up every time.
I set up my trash. I can delete my floodgates that are in my way. I gain memory at end of attack. I unsuspend end of attack. Now my deck has less problems versus floodgates, which is one of the big things that stops Fenrir, because now you get multiple ways to deal with floodgates.
Mm-hmm.
It also has like this cheeky effect that all turns when one of your other Digimon's deleted, you could evolve into Fenrir. So there's like combo lines where you go Soluga without passing turn, go to Helluga to pop a problem, and then because Helluga died, evolve into Fenrir free from trash. Also, if you set it up correctly, it insulates your deck from Death X, which is one of the deck's biggest weaknesses traditionally. Mm-hmm. This card does literally everything for this deck. It's so powerful. It is only one new card. It can also play like the Dino Bee a little bit, and like
regular
a card to support. And the
red,
card
is
red purple DNA, the red purple DNA, because it works with the deck, and you get to play like the Sethmon, which also happens to be a dark animal, which works with the deck. Mm-hmm. But mostly it's this Fenriloogamon card being absolutely fucking nuts. However, I do think it's not quite tier 1 because this deck does take some time to set up. It's unless they're just high rolling you, it's still Fenrir has to find a ton of pieces combo deck. Might realize the little pattern in tier 1.5. Decks that require a lot of pieces, but when they hit their pieces, they're basically tier 1 decks.
Yeah. I agree. Fenrir players, you already knew this deck was gas.
Lugas. Yeah. That card is insane. And this deck gets like a new angle next set. I think this version's probably more fun, but like, hey, you get a whole nother thing to do next set too. Mm-hmm. Or next major set.
Mm-hmm. All right, move on to GraceNova. Also got support this set with the Agumon and Gaomon, level 4, level 3, level 4, which actually finally finishes the deck, because before you didn't actually have enough level 3s and 4s to like finish a full deck. So you had to like tech in random bullshit. And this deck does have some cool niches. You can fight against Magnamon X with this deck, because the level 5 Crescemon is a lingering effect your opponent can't suspend. So Magnamon X will get affected by that when their turn begins. And also the Ko and Sayo, the blue tamer, started the opponent's turn DNA. You can DNA into Grace and then pop their Magna X because it triggers before they can get to protection. So it has a unique niche. The deck is finally finished. The Gaomon helps this deck a lot, actually. The 1 extra memory and draw lets you get to your pieces and also be able to do your DNA without passing turn or having to wait until your next turn to get it off. So I think this deck is like low tier 2, actually. You can fight with this deck for sure. And it's also a really fun deck to play. So
yeah, I've definitely seen this deck around. It definitely looks really cool. I think it's a good time to mention, what are the ways you beat Magnamon X? It's like 3 things you're looking for. It's like big booty with defense, so like Tyrant type stuff, get super huge and prevent them from attacking. Mm-hmm. good ace cards that could like stop them before they proc the effect again, because the card needs to reapply its effect, and that's like its biggest. It's like one drawback.
Right.
So good ace cards, good defensive cards, and then lingering effects. So like things that stay on the card, but that last till the end of the turn.
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's that card. Another good card for that is Venus is super nuts against it because then it can't proc its Wind Digivolving effect at all.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just or anything that prevents you from using Wind Digivolving effects. Although I think that's only Venus at the moment.
I think
so. Yeah. But yeah, lingering effects, good defensive walls, good defensive aces are the big answers to Magnamon X. And so that because the deck has access to one, it means it can actually handle it.
Yep. So GraceNova, solid deck. Moving on to Jesmon. Everyone is always telling me, "Where's Jesmon? Where's Jesmon?" Bro, it's right here, and it's for fun.
I'll give it the one tier 3 bump because it gets to play Magnamon X and give Jesmon all of its abilities. That's a tier 3 bump. It's not. We're not putting it into like the tier 2 and above is where you're actually competitive. Tier 3 is like, oh, maybe you can maybe sometimes do something.
Okay, all right. That's enough about Jesmon. Hopefully, all the Jesmon people in my comments will shut up.
You get Magnamon X, and that's about it.
Milith. This deck is one of the only win condition decks left now that Apocalypse is gone. And since you don't have to interact with your opponent, you can just ignore their Magnamon X and then just mill their deck out. I think this deck's good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of decks that are trying to draw and search a lot. So when their decks are accelerating your clock for you, the biggest issues with this deck is that it is really skill dependent and it's really weak to aggro. So if you find if you're faced, not all of the decks are aggressive. Like Vmon Armors is like mid range. It can be aggressive sometimes, but not always. Vaccine is generally not aggressive. Imperial can be aggressive if it finds its pieces early enough, but not always. Tyrant's never aggressive. Fenrir's also in the, like, so there's a lot of decks that are not quite aggressive enough, but there's some other decks like Numemon or Mirage that will just explode you, and you'll just die really fast and not be able to set up your pieces. But if you're against any deck that's too slow, you're just decking them out and they literally not interacting. You're ignoring security, which is one of the biggest defensive mechanics in the game. You're ignoring aces, which is one of the big defensive mechanics in the game. You just don't care.
Yep. So, yeah. I mean, the hardest matchup with this deck is your own brain.
Yeah, this deck you have to think wait. You have to think like 3 turns ahead a lot of the time.
Yeah.
You get to play a lot of removal options, but if your removal doesn't do anything, it's not super great. But you also get to like you have to look at cards that say gain memory and search and play all of them, which is pretty strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Mills, good deck. If you put in the time, like you'll get rewarded.
Like honestly, if someone's like a master at this deck, it probably actually bumps up a tier, but you have to be like not making any mistakes for hours.
Yeah, I agree. All right. So this is okay. So we didn't make this tier list ourselves. I just found it on Tier Maker. So some of these cards we don't really know what deck they're supposed to represent. So this is just Vikemon Ace. I mean, I guess technically he has his own deck, but Vikemon Ace in and of itself is a good card. But like his own deck, I suppose. I don't
know what deck we put that deck card in. We'll put it in bulk bin, but the card itself is good. The card is it's not. I don't think it's quite as good as Valk Ace because I think Valk Ace is a little bit more generic.
Mm-hmm.
But Vikemon's a good card with no good deck for it.
Yes.
So when we get a good deck for it, this card is gonna be really good.
Yeah, maybe you tech this in like Mirage or something. I don't know, but
Chaosmon, not a real deck. He's
yeah. The card itself, again, the card itself is good, but in what deck? Like I don't know.
I think that card's actually just okay. There's in the X6, there's Ultimate Chaosmon, which is just way better. Like you'd always want to play that over it.
Oh, that's true. All right.
So
Poo Flare. I mean, technically, this has a lingering effect. The issue is that I don't think Magnamon X ever has less than 2 sources. So,
yeah, I think the most Magnamon decks. I mean, I guess you could play Zudo Ace, and Zudo Ace is really good against Magnamon. Actually,
actually, you can just run. So Dekardramon and the Mailbird effect would both stun Magnamon X regardless of its sources.
Yeah. And maybe this deck could play Vike Ace, actually. I haven't really thought about this deck too much, but it's probably just mid.
True.
It doesn't... It's really bad against go big decks, and some decks are just go too big. Tyrant deletes Tamers.
And is unaffected by Digimon.
So it's probably just not good enough, but it does have some niches. and it's not completely irrelevant. And it's does have an answer to Magnamon X, even though it's not going to win the game that fast.
Yep. Agreed. All right, we'll move on to Bloom Lord.
Are you excited to talk about how bad this deck is now? It's actually bad.
It's actually bad because all of your cards are less than 4,000 DP, so you get absolutely ran by Rapidmon X. You have to suspend, and your guys are less than 4,000 DP. It's so jovers for Bloom Lord, unfortunately.
Also, there's a bunch of decks teching Pomamon right now, which is one of this deck can play it, but it's one of its worst weaknesses because all of the Imperial Tamers play that, the Fenrir Tamers play that, the Tyrant cards play that. So cards that prevent you from playing by effect are pretty good right now. Also, Vaccine plays... My build plays 4 copies of Pillowmon. You don't get to play by effects against that deck.
Yeah, I agree. I just think overall Bloom, even though in and of itself, it's a good deck with a good engine, it folds to like everything that's good in the meta right now.
Every tech card ever.
I almost want to put it tier 4. I would put it tier 4 if it wasn't like technically a good deck.
Yeah. Well, we could keep it right next to Jesmon. Yeah. They can cope together.
Yeah, true. We will move on to Gallantmon. Oh, look, another Coper deck that people keep nagging me about in my comments. I don't know. I see the vision with Gallantmon. I see the vision for Gallantmon every time. The problem is executing on the vision, and he just never gets there.
I think something that's neat about the deck is that when it's all else fails, it could just play like Lilithloop, but Lilith is probably better at doing that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
We can play it higher tier 3, but it's still whatever. It's Gallant. It just doesn't have the support. They keep giving it support that doesn't fix its problems, which one of my favorite decks has the same problem. They keep giving it support that doesn't fix the problems.
Yeah. All right. That's enough Gallantmon talk. Gamamon. Oos. It has big what does your deck do energy. But that's all I got to say about Gamamon. If you don't know what the deck does, you'll probably just get Regulusmon aced, and you're going to be sad.
It's not good. It's still whatever.
Ulforce. Does this have a niche right now that isn't like Mirage but worse? Mirage at home?
It's Mirage but worse, and also it randomly loses to other things like Tame removal, which Mirage sometimes does loses to, but this deck loses to even more.
I'm trying to think if Ulforce has anything going for it than Mirage.
It didn't get like any new cards except for unless you want to play like Vicemon Ace or play like that's it. Like it doesn't do anything better than it was already doing. It was already kind of just mid. It's a way less consistent version of Mirage.
Yeah, I'm really racking my brain here for all you Ulforce believers, but I don't know much about this deck, and I'm just gonna give like the standard Andy version that this is just bad Mirage. All right, moving on to Red Hybrid. Has been tier 1 for like the last 3 metas. I think this deck has finally fallen off just because there's so many fat walls that are
this deck's biggest weakness always was big ass walls. Like, so it was bad against Machinedramon, even Machinedramon was like mid. And aces, which are now prevalent in the meta. Like, if you prevent this deck from attacking and get punished for it, this deck's not good. This deck's best when it's super aggressive and pushing really fast and winning the game. But now there's a lot more defensive options to stop this deck from even going off.
Yep.
It still can sometimes high roll you and draw super good and just hit you really hard, so I think it's high tier 2. But it's not. It's finally no longer in tier 1.
Yeah, I agree.
Technically, you can play both Ukomons, but I don't think the new Ukomon's super great for this deck. I think it's more like the old one.
I think they do run a split. Like they run like 2-3, and like I don't know. You can have your preference on that, but yes, technically you could. Moving on to Greymon. I see the vision with how Greymon could be like useful or playable in this meta. The problem is it's piece reliant, and you can't even have like consistent searchers because some of your pieces are off color, like black tie can't run.
I've heard a lot of people say this deck is so good. It actually has like a niche where it can beat Magnamon X and Tyrant and stuff. And every time I played against it, I'm like, you do it one time and then I still beat you. So I don't like it. Doesn't really even feel like it's doing that to me. But I will say it's probably just decent enough to stay, like bottom tier 2.
Yeah, I agree. Bottom tier 2.
Greymon's pretty good.
Like I see the vision when people tell me Greymon is good because oh, you have Digivolve, you can't be DP reduced, you get really big and have raid. Like I see the vision. The problem is that executing on the vision with Greymon is like really hard because of all the pieces you need to go exactly your way to have your stack live for one turn, and then
yeah. I think something that I would point out is I think the better version of this deck is probably Wargrey X, like the more aggressive version, not the black version.
Yeah.
Just because it gets you much more reward for being aggressive, and then you be aggressive, then gain a bunch of your turn back, so you have more time to like get pieces because you're getting more memory.
Mm-hmm. You also get more DP in that version of the deck too, because of the old Metal Grey X gives you just plus 3,000.
Yep. I mean, all versions can play that card, but yeah. Something the old version, the black or gray version is still probably decent because the new Metal Grey X prevents you from being DP minus, which means you can actually avoid Heaven's Judgment for a turn.
Yeah.
And then be bigger. You're bigger than them and avoid Heaven's Judgment, which is nice. But like, it's just Greymon very piece reliant. Isn't really an OTK deck either. It like takes some time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you kind of spoke a little bit to the like opportunity cost problem Greymon has. It's like if you pick one option, you lose out on like the other thing that could be good. So if you don't have one and then you're missing out on the other in the time when you need it, it's like, dang it.
And if you're playing all of them, you're just bricking too much.
Yeah, exactly. All right, move on to this will be security control. I think even though the deck is still like a competitive deck, I foresee there being a potential problem playing against Magnamon X, because even though technically speaking, like on their first check, if they hit a security bomb, you could kill the Magnamon X. I feel like the good Magna X players will just find a way to proc their own Magnamon effect before they swing.
Yeah, they just proc. I think you just the first turn you bring it out, you always try to get the double checks with it because as long as you can go into it without passing turn, you could get two of their damage out, and then on top of that, just try your best to proc it every turn, and then like, and now I just have a time on my security control deck when I'm already giving them a ton of memory, so now I'm just getting clocked out.
Yeah.
Against almost every other deck that's not a Magnamon X deck, it's still probably fantastic. It's probably just wipes a bunch of stuff out, and you feel really sad. Oh, I lose my big stack, my deck does nothing. But because Magnamon X is the meta card, you have to build, like, I've been seeing people try to build super weird to combat that, and I just don't think it's enough.
Yeah. So I think if you play Second, you probably just like concede your Magna X matchup and just try to beat the rest of the field, and then pray matchup gods are on your side. That's the only.
But there are two Magnamon X decks, and if some people even try to tech Magnamon X in Imperial, I don't agree with that, but you can do that too, and so that makes it technically 3 Magnamon X decks you have to avoid. They're all like high tier.
Yep. All right, enough about Setcon.
Also, sorry, one more thing. Partition is also good versus Setcon because
true.
They get rid of your stuff, and then I get to make my stuff again.
That is true. Hunters. So we didn't talk about Hunters in the last tier list because we just forgot about it, but it was probably Hunters has just been one of those decks where it's always just kind of tier 2 because of what it does. It's just good. Like, it's consistent. It had one of the best removals in the game. Keyword had. And Arrested Superior mode would just like swing and but now that Magnamon X and Tyrant are both immune to Digimon effects and their blockers that are bigger than Arrested Digimon, I think this deck has finally fallen off to like tier 3.
Yeah. Also, something that's really unfortunate is this deck's best removal doesn't really get the benefit of removing aces. Because the way it's
the board,
the way it's mechanic where it doesn't leave the board, so you don't get the overflow, which is like one of the best ways. Like, that's how they balance aces. So now aces are just way better cards against this deck by a lot. And this deck just didn't get support for 3 sets in a row or 4 sets in a row. So
yeah, I mean there isn't really a way to give this deck with support without just outright power creeping like the cards that are in it. It's such like an insular like paint by numbers deck.
I played this deck. I personally enjoyed this deck. 48 of the cards in the deck are chosen for you.
Yeah. So we'll move on to Mirage. I think this is, I guess Magnamon is blue. I'm gonna say this is the premier blue deck of the format. Pure blue deck. How about that?
Yeah, we were having a discussion. This deck is very good. It's just, what level of good is this deck?
Yeah, you have the tools to beat all the best decks. The question is, how often are those tools actually going to come up for you? So, okay, so the key players. So this deck got 2 new cards. So you have the Gaomon level 4, which you talked about before with Mirage. So it forces your opponent to draw a card. Well, you both draw a card by effect. So you draw 2 cards, one for Digivolve, one for the effect. Your opponent draws 1. And then if your opponent has 8 more cards in their hand, you gain a memory. So it's a 2-cost Digivolve normally. So if they have 8 or more, they Digivolve for 1. And then the Inheritable is just straight up jamming, which is obviously super good for Mirage, especially now that Bukamon got limited. And the second support card this deck got is it's not support card, but just it's an old Mirage card that is now very good. It's the Makagao from, I don't remember if it's the EX or BT16.
I don't even remember.
But it's one of the old Makagaos, and the effect is when attacking, if your opponent has 8 more cards in their hand, this Digimon's attack can't be redirected. So it's not even can't be blocked. It can't be redirected, which gets around Tyrant too, which is super annoying.
Around Magnamon X and Tyrant.
Yeah, so those are the 2 big walls, and you get around both of them. So, and then the inheritable of that Makagao is when you add a card, when your opponent adds a card to hand by an effect, you unsuspend. So ideally, you swing with the Makagao, you become unredirectable, get a check-in with jamming, then Digivolve into MirageGao, bounce the card back to the hand, unsuspend, and gain back your memory, and then go from there, right?
Yeah.
Super good combo, obviously. Burst mode's still super good. You can kill someone from like 4 health to 0 in 1 turn. Super consistent. You got trainings, you got Zudomon, so you can sometimes just cheat out like Mirage.
Zudomon Ace is cracked. It also is another way to round Magna, because you can strip the armor from Magna, and Magna needs its armor in trait in source to have its effect.
So it's a good deck. So I'm arguing for this deck being tier 1. Bryce, you were saying it was 1.5 because you felt that maybe you don't see the pieces you need exactly when you need them.
You don't see the pieces you need, and also the level 5 is good that it can't be redirected, but because you have to swing at level 5, level 5s are super vulnerable to aces, like very vulnerable to aces. So it makes it more vulnerable in that aspect. But I will say, I do think this deck has like a legit good matchup versus Magnamon X, which is a big one-up for this deck, and also against a lot of other decks, sometimes it just wins the game for no reason.
Yeah.
So, if your tier list, if you want to put a 1, I will not be mad. It is right on the cusp. I think it's like the top of tier 1.5, right on tier 2, right tier 1. It's a very good deck. Zudomon Ace, crazy card. Mirage Agent is crazy. They just kill you sometimes. Also, the level 6 Mirage is still one of the best floodgate effects in the game. It's good against Ukomon, which is a new card.
Dude, if you have Mirage out and they have Ukomon in the back, BT16, it's so over for them. It's a mandatory effect. They have to add a card to their hands, instantly seal their turn. It's hilarious.
Yes.
Okay, we'll put it at the bottom of tier 1.
Okay. But it is a good deck. So, and you don't even need that many new cards. You just get like, oh, I get my new level 4, I'm good to go.
Yep.
Oh, and you pick up some old cards as well, I guess, because that card was not being played before.
Yes. Okay, move on to Shoutmon. Has been so irrelevant. This deck does nothing. I want to put it bulk tier.
I'll put bulk tier. I will say, some people were saying that Cross 4 can come back. I don't agree.
Yeah, Cross 4 cannot come back.
That card is so cracked. That card would be good in this format, too. Like, I don't...
No.
Your deck just would go so fast.
Agree. Alright, moving on to Royal Knights.
Put this in tier 2. This deck kind of still does stuff sometimes.
Does it? People aren't really playing Psychmon type cards anymore, huh?
Not really. It's hard. Like, purple is in the worst spot, and that's the best deck to play that kind of card.
Yeah.
So if you're not saying Psychmon, sometimes you could just, play a bunch of idiots.
Okay.
It's decent enough, especially if there's not a lot of Psychmon going around. And if you're not dying against this deck, you spent too much time playing the game, I'm gonna play Omnimon and play 12 guys out real quick.
That's true.
Hey, my Magnamon can block two things. It can't block like 8 things.
Okay, fair enough. Moving on to Shine. I think now that Leviamon, no one's going to be playing that deck anymore. I think Shine is in a little bit better of a spot. I mean, the deck was always good. It was just always a matter of you get dunked on by Levia. So
And it's a high roll deck.
yeah.
Still a good high roll deck.
Yeah, if I had to choose between this and Mirage, I pick Mirage every day of the week. But if you're just a Shine enjoyer, then Shine is still good. Like,
also, I guarantee someone in Latin America will top with this deck because they always top with this deck for whatever reason. I don't know what it is. Every time I look at Latin America tier, it's like, oh, Shine won again somehow.
They got the sauce down there, dude. All right, Rosemon has the same problem as Bloom, but it's actually just worse.
Yep.
I'll put it tier 4. It's a real deck, so it's not bulk bin. All right, tier 4. Okay, Alphamon. I mean, technically the Daruga stuff is Alphamon support too, yeah? Just by virtue of the names.
Yeah, I don't know how much of it supports it, but yeah, probably worse than the new stuff, and that stuff's not good already, so whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I see
this deck is just a little bit away from being a broken deck again. They printed the card that says I can't be affected. If this deck could have the Magnamon text again, this deck would be fucking broken.
Yeah. I'm inclined to put this like low tier 2. Like I think this deck has the pieces where like if they make the big stack, it's probably enough.
Maybe. I mean, like, Alphamon Orican is one of the craziest cards ever printed. One of the most insane bosses they've ever put in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, I see the vision with Alphamon. I'll put it low tier 2.
So we'll keep it up there.
Yeah. Belphamon. I never know what to think about this deck because, like, in theory, it's good, and then it just kind of folds when you play it. So
it's like harder to play than it seems, just to achieve like an OTK like Grandis from like BT9's type deck. It does gain unaffected, which is a great keyword as we've been going over in this whole tier list. And I've heard people have discussions that maybe it counters some of the meta decks. I'm willing to concede that could be tier 2 just because it's solid. Yeah. But
I'll agree with that.
But it's like a weird hard deck, but when it's working and not breaking, it's like, oh, I'm now unaffected and I can do cool stuff, and then I kill you.
Okay, I'll allow it. Moving on to Ravemon.
That deck was tier 4 when it came out.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put it. Yeah, I'll put it bulk. Sorry. Okay. Okay. Brigadramon. I'm gonna say this is for fun.
This deck gets cooked by Rapidmons. Any deck with Rapidmon is just cooking this deck. True. Also, it's not good against Imperial either because they can't use their defense.
Oh yeah, you're right. You just get stripped immediately.
You can play Vikemon Ace. Like what I said, we don't have a good deck for Vikemon Ace, so that stays true.
Fair enough. Moving on to Numemon. I mean, this was a top tier deck last format, and it got even better this format with Ukomon, Valkyrie Ace. What else can you play?
That's all you need.
Yeah.
This deck is crazy. I would argue that this is the second best deck in the game, over the Vmon version of Magnamon X.
I agree with that, actually.
This deck is so nuts. And there are so many games where you just can't play the game because they pop the hell off on you.
Yes. Also worth noting that Magnamon X and Magnamon -CP lasts until the end of the opponent's turn, so linger effects, so you can stack those on Magna X and then like either delete them at the beginning of their turn or make them like 2000 DP so they can't swing.
Yeah, this deck is crazy. Sometimes you don't get to play the game because they go so fast. There's a lot of like tier 2, tier 3 decks that if they want could play 8 Ukomon. This deck could actually play 8 Ukomon and it's amazing. And it wants to because it wants to get as much aggro and rookies as possible. People literally had to adjust their deck builds to start including Digimon Emperor because this deck exists.
Yeah.
This deck is nuts. One of the big concessions though I say to Vaccine though is this deck is really hard to play from behind. Yeah. Once it starts losing the board and losing tempo, it starts falling behind really hard. And one of the problems about playing from behind is that the vaccine version gets to play Pillowmon, and they get to max out on it.
That's true. hard to play by effects. Your Magnamon X gets turned off.
You can still get rid of it, but you're passing turn generally to get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this is just the premier aggro deck of the format. Now that Red Hybrid kind of got lowered down a peg, I think Numemon is here to take its spot, which I think is good. I think there should be an aggro deck option.
Yeah, and if there's an aggro deck option, this deck, sometimes you just lose without playing the game.
Yep. All right, we'll move on to. There's another Phoenixmon here.
That's bulk. That's the same deck.
Yeah, okay. Orumon. This is what we say was just the Dorugorumon, but worse.
It's Brigadiramon, but worse. Yeah. The Commandramon stuff.
Also Brigadiramon, but worse. Yeah.
The worst version of the Commandramon stuff. So why it's not better? If it's not better than it, it's in the same tier.
Yeah. True.
Or worse.
I mean, does this deck do anything cool? I mean, it has the weird unsuspend stuff, but
it's more tricky, but it doesn't really do anything else.
Yeah. All right, move on to Metal Garurumon. I think this deck is actually pretty decent. So, Metal Garuru, the new one, the secret rare from last set, says 3 of your opponent's Digimon and Tamer can't suspend until the end of their turn. So you can prevent Magna X from suspending, which is pretty good. You have access to bounce. It's more limited than Mirage's, since your bounce effects are either, it would be the Where Garuru X, the old one, which bounces a level 4 or lower. And then there is Metal Garurumon X, which you have to bounce your opponent's lowest level Digimon. So they can play around that pretty easily. But I do think this deck has a good niche. You're not really like OTK, kill them in one turn with your level 5s anymore. You're more of like a stun out their guys. You have evade, swing twice, next turn swing twice, and then try to like Omni X, do something like that. So you're more of like a 2-turn kill deck now, with some protection and like preventing your opponent from doing stuff thrown in there, which is cool. Moving on to Rapidmon X. This deck is cool, but piece reliant and not in the good way.
I saw a really cool version of this deck that was basically just an Imperialdramon deck that top end with this card.
Oh yeah, that was on East's video. Yeah, it looks cool.
The deck was spicy, but it's still probably for tier 4, maybe tier 3, because if you can play the Imperialdramon cards, they're good. But
yeah, okay, this is gonna get blocked by our faces, but this deck is tier 4 fun. All right, moving on to Edamon. So Edamon technically got support this set because all the cards in Edamon are yellow-black. So you can DNA into Shakamon, and you can play
ace into all the best aces.
Yeah, yellow-black is probably the best ace color combination. Problem is that you're still just kind of playing Edamon. So, okay, I'm gonna buff it up from tier 4 fun. I'm gonna say this is tier 3. Tier 3.
Mostly because it can play all of the best aces in the game.
Yeah.
Literally all of them if it wants.
Moving on to Leomon. Also got a really good support card this set with the Mad Leo level 4. So it's purple-green, digivolves over your level 3s for 2 memory. And then when attacking, you can digivolve into a level 5 with Leomon in its name for 3 memory. So it's not reduced by 1. So it's not 2 memory like the other level 4s do. This one just digivolves for 3 into your level 5 when attacking. But the trade-off is that the inheritable is that at the end of the attack, you can delete that Digimon to play a level 3 Digimon from your trash. So effectively, you proc Fortitude. Level 4?
Level 4.
Oh, it's level 4 lower?
I believe so.
Oh, that's even better. Anyway, Mad Leomon is a good card. Basically, you get Fortitude and you get to bring back another card from your trash. So you get 2 cards out. So with Fortitude, you can block all your on-deletion effects and bring your guy back. It's a really good card. It helps you out a lot because before Heavy Leomon's problem was that sometimes it just wouldn't die in situations where you actually needed it to die to clear board.
Yeah. Also, the deck had only 2 good level 4s. Their third level 4 to play was just awful. All of them sucked.
Yeah, that's probably like the bigger reason why that card is good. So yeah, you finally have a good level 4, third level 4 to play. and it facilitates your deck's game plan. So overall, I think this is like a solid tier 2 deck.
Yeah, it's a solid beatdown deck. It's not great in the Magnamon X, and that's probably its biggest issue.
Yeah, that's true. Leviamon. This deck fell off a fucking cliff. Like,
let's talk about this deck in last format, because I thought it was the best deck in the game, and I think we were wrong as people adapted. It was the most, because a lot of formats this is the best deck in the game. It's obvious it's the best deck in the game.
Mm-hmm.
There's never been a best deck that's had so much actual counterplay as this deck.
Mm-hmm. Like, we saw the David deck come up, which just turbo stomped this deck into the ground. What else?
The tech in Numemon decks to play Zort Defeat, where it literally can't play the game anymore.
Zort Defeat tech, yes. Yeah.
Also, it was still like a purple deck, so even though it was like a more, I'd say, helmet-ish purple deck, you just kind of go for the big stack, there was like different answers you had with it.
Yeah.
Sorry, 1 second.
You're good.
My phone started going off and not muting. But yeah, it did so much and it felt so strong, and its existence just shut a lot of decks out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So it had a lot of the tier 1 potential, but realistically in that format, it was probably like tier 1.5, maybe even tier 2, as people adapted to it. Also, as a purple deck, it's always been weak to bounce, so like Mirage can also just screw it over sometimes as well.
Yeah.
So that fell off huge. In the current format, I think it kind of is where it left off last format. I think it's still a solid tier 2 deck.
Yeah.
It is still really good versus a lot of things. It still gets shut off things by existing. If it it's less common, so you'll be able to catch people with that power a lot more often. Diva is not nearly as strong as Diva is super bad versus a lot of new stuff that came out.
Yeah.
We didn't even put it on our list. We didn't put it on our list, but it's so bad in the Magnamon X, like a lot of the time, not all the time.
Yeah.
It's really bad in the Rapidmon. Numemon still aggroes that deck out a good chunk of the time, and Tyrant, like you said, is super good versus the deck. And then there's also areas where Imperial could stop it as well if they play it correctly, because a Blastace, I believe, is still playing by an effect.
It's digivolving by effect. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you play it correctly, you just punish them for even trying to ace you.
Mm-hmm. With the new Imperialdramon Dragon Mode. Yes.
Yeah, it got so many weaknesses, and because that deck is kind of got countered by basically every new mechanic they've added this set, Leviamon gets a little bit more breathing room to do stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good deck in and of itself. Like we said, the issue last format was people just figured out how to counter it. And now that coming into this new format, those decks that were countering it are just not as good strategies anymore. I think there's definitely, like you said, more room for Leviamon to breathe and just be a real deck again.
Yeah. It still doesn't deal with Magnamon X super great, except for the biggest thing it can do is be a purple deck and just go really wide. So as long as they're not also a Rapidmon deck, you kind of like go around it a little bit. But I was making note, the Anubis versions are going to be better this format for that reason, because they help you go wide. That's
true. Good point. Alright, move on to Beelzemon. I mean, it's Beelzemon. We always say this about this deck. It's Beelzemon. Like, if you high roll, you can win, but I don't see the high rolls as much anymore. Like, I'm inclined to...
And it didn't get any new support.
I'm inclined to just put this, like, high tier 3 now.
Sure. I mean, it can still anything that's like weaker than it is still weaker than it.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to last deck, Machinedramon. Got support last set, and it still didn't do anything really. Like, even though you do technically gain unaffected, it's like unaffected at home now. Like, it's not as good as Magnamon X protection. I feel like Tyrant kind of does what this deck wants to do, but better.
Like Tyrant and Magnamon X, like, why would I play Machinedramon that requires so much work to gain all this invulnerable that has like counters to it, like Source Strip, and it's only invulnerable a certain amount of times. When I could just play a deck that just gains invulnerable for a turn and then try to repeat that.
Yeah.
It is the actual like a deck that just does what it wants to do, but way better. Before we close, we didn't have Diva on our list. Where would we put Diva technically right now?
I think it's like a low tier 2 deck now. maybe even high tier 3.
I think that's tier 3, and like maybe the Omni Zoo deck that we also didn't have on here is maybe.
Yeah, the Dink Masters. That's
that deck gets to play all the good aces, but
yeah, I think it's a tier 2 deck.
Yeah.
Okay. BT16. Magnamon X. You must be this tall to ride. Unfortunately.
Yes, sir.
We'll see if the meta develops and if Magnamon X kind of gets figured out by some builds like we happened last format. I don't necessarily foresee that happening just because of how actually good Magnamon X is, but I think we could get proven wrong. Someone could cook something up, get in the kitchen.
Yeah. Just to reiterate, our list got a tiny bit messed up. So at the very end, we're missing Lilithmon, we're missing Vmon armors, and we're missing Gallantmon.
Yeah, I think I pressed the backspace button on accident, so that's my bad.
But top 5 decks, I'd say, are Magnamon X in Vaccine, Numemon, Magnamon X in Vmon, and then Mirage and Imperial, kind of like in the similar spots. Like on a good day, either of them could be tier 1, the other one could be tier 1.5.
I agree. All right, BT16 tier list. Now you know. GG's.
GG's gamers.